Hello and welcome to the Guest Education Global Leadership Summit. Thank you for joining us. We're pleased to introduce a fantastic panel of early years education experts for this session. The chair and moderator, Dr. Sarah Rogers, founder and CEO of Early Years Educational Services and Quest Direct. Courtney Donaldson, managing director of child-centric sectors at Christie & Co. Laura Henry Allain, international writer, speaker and consultant, and May Zalat, center manager at the Blossom Nursery. We hope that you enjoyed the session, and I'll now hand over to Dr. Sarah.
Thank you very much, Danny, and hello everybody, and it's really lovely to have you here joining us today on this panel. So I'd like to also welcome the panelists. So Courtney, thank you very much for joining us. You're probably from a wet and windy London as well, aren't you? So morning for you. Hello Laura, again, it's lovely to see you. It's lovely to chat to you again, also from the UK. And May, we're all jealous because May's sitting there in the sun. Good afternoon, May, how are you? It's lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us today, and we're going to obviously talk about the early years. We've got lots and lots of experts in the room, and we're going to talk about today about what's been going on in the last year, all the changes that happened in early years and the challenges that we've faced. We're going to look very much at an international perspective with all the expertise in the room here today, but we're also going to talk about the way forward, because I also think there's been lots of positive things that we've learned and lessons that we've learned moving forward from the pandemic and the current situation in all across the world. So I personally think early years are the best people in the world. I think early years are the most important people in the world, and I always start off any training by saying that to everybody. And I think one thing that's come from the pandemic is this understanding, a wide understanding from parents and society, that early years is fundamental. Good early years education is fundamental to the well-being of both children, but also families as well. And we've seen families struggling with their homeschooling, and they certainly appreciate teachers much more. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But also there's been many challenges for us in the early years. We've been hearing that settings have had a much reduced capacity. So I want to talk about the resilience of settings. And I know Courtney's got some really good opinions on that as well. And Laura gets into lots of settings in the UK, so I'd like to hear her opinion on that too, and how people are doing things and rising to the challenges. And May, certainly in Dubai, in the UAE, there's been many challenges with nurseries closed for a long time and getting back slowly, so we'd like to talk about that. And also we're going to talk about staff, because staff well-being is central to children's well-being, and if we don't look after ourselves, we don't look after our staff, we're not in a position to look after children. So first of all, May, could you tell us what it's been like for you in the last few months in Dubai, please? I know that you were closed for a very long time. How is it? How are you getting back to normal now? How are things at the moment?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, we were closed, like in all the nurses in UAE were closed for almost 8 months. And that really affected the children and the teachers and the parents as well. So now we're trying to, everything is back to normal, almost back to normal. We are all on 50% capacity. So we start, welcome back the children on 50% capacity. And what we are trying to work on actually now is the well-being of the parents, the children, and the teachers, because it's really hard to follow the protocols, the COVID-19 protocols and guidelines, while keeping the children happy and safe in the nursery. So that's what we're really concentrating on now in the nurseries, the well-being of the children and of the parents and the teachers, of course.
I think from speaking to other early years educators in the UAE, you are still under a lot of challenges. So you are still operating, like you say, you're 50% down, you're still having challenges of bubbles and spacing. And how is that affecting you at the moment?
It's affecting, actually mainly it's affecting the children, to be honest, because as we were discussing earlier, it's really hard for 18-month or 2 years old to ask them to keep distance, 2 meters distance. In the past, we were always encouraging the children to share toys, and that's actually a development that we're working on. Now they are not allowed, we're not allowing them to share toys, because whenever a child start playing with one of the toys, it has to be taken out of the class immediately to be sanitized. So all these things are affecting the children, to be honest. So we are trying our best to make them feel like it's a normal setting, and that it will never be like in the past, but we're trying our best, to be honest.
I can imagine it's very, very stressful. I spoke to Laura the other day, and Laura was rushing around between nurseries on World Book Day, online between nurseries and World Book Day. How do you find people are coping with the challenges in the UK, Laura? Are they the same kind of challenges that are in Dubai?
I think they're quite similar. I think they mirror, slightly, but within the early years, the nurseries, preschools and childminds in the UK, they've always been open within lockdown, although sometimes to a reduced capacity because there have been some parents who haven't sent their children. And I feel that, as Sarah says, last week I did this mammoth online author visit for World Book Day. And I think I want to give my biggest thanks to the early years community, because they have been working relentlessly under most difficult challenges in terms of PPI testing, those particular issues, as May said, sanitizing the resources, the equipment, dealing with little bubbles, because every room and classroom has their own little bubble. If somebody is tested positive, and then all of the implications that happen with regards to that, having to inform parents. But on the whole, and parents have been super supportive with the early years stuff. They've really recognised that they've done a good job. And last year, October, I went back into a nursery and I did 3 months. I covered. So I was sleeves up. I was in this nursery.
Oh, interesting.
Well, I can talk my talk because I know what it's like.
Yeah.
You've got those challenges. You've got having those gentle reminders. And as May said, it is so unnatural to say to children to stick to your bubble, and if two babies get together to have a little snuggling, or they want to play with the same resource. And I think we're going to be having to have so much support for children and years to come, and staff who work with it, whatever their role is, and supporting the staff, more importantly, with their well-being and welfare, and what that looks like and feels like in practice.
Definitely, and I definitely echo that the early years has done a fantastic job, certainly for us in the UK during this last lockdown, when schools and colleges and universities were all remote learning. Early years was still there, so day in, day out, really meeting the needs. One of the things I want to talk about in a few minutes is talking about the needs of the families as well, especially women, because we know that women have taken on the bulk of the childcare recently. So we'll come back to that in a moment. But Courtney, when I was talking to you last week, you actually said to me the sector was really resilient, which was really lovely to hear, because you get involved lots of both internationally and at home, and the UK, you get involved, don't you? What's your feeling on how people are feeling out there at the moment?
Thanks, Sarah. I think people are feeling tired. I think there are some significant challenges. It's been 12 months. I mean, the sector has rallied across the world in just such a profound way based on the challenges that they've faced. As Laura and May have said, different countries have had different experiences. Here in the UK, the early year settings were asked to close and only cater for the children of key workers, but without any guidance in those first early weeks. So they were really just finding their way as to how they could operate in what was really a very unknown environment at the time. But I think from our perspective, when we look at early years on a sort of a global perspective, the sector is resilient. The sector is full of very passionate operators, owners, early years educators who really all have that commonality of wanting to do the very best for the children in their care. And I think nurseries around the world at different times have all faced very different challenges, be they different challenges around COVID or different challenges around regulation and funding. But they've always come through that working together. And I think particularly here in the UK, we've seen the sector has become more communicative with each other, with nurseries supporting each other and sharing resources and trying to help and assist the parents in the best possible way. So I think the sector has historically been a resilient sector, and I think it will be resilient going forward. But there are some underlying challenges, which means that there are some nurseries that have closed and won't reopen. We talk about health and wellbeing. There are nurseries that around the world are under acute financial pressure. So the ability to invest in training their staff, supporting their staff, refurbishing and maintaining their buildings, financially things are incredibly tight for some settings, and going forward that might have longer term repercussions also.
I think that's a really, really good point, that financial point and that financial support, because in the UK, yes, nurseries have managed to stay open, but they've also had some support. I know it's not always been perfect support, and I know it's been an underfunded sector, we know, worldwide for many, many years. But May, you've not had any support like that at all. And I think the nurseries during the summer, certainly last summer, felt quite isolated, didn't they? And for me, what was a really good thing that you just talked about, community there, Courtney. May, in the UAE, the community, the early years community seemed to come together, certainly in the autumn, and say we are a profession together, we are an important sector. Do you feel that now? Do you feel that people are working together a little bit more?
Yes, I have to agree with Courtney. This is what exactly happened in the UAE. So we reached a point that our community as early years, we start sending by October, end of October, when we didn't hear anything about reopening the nurseries. We were waiting in September, then we didn't hear anything. Then we worked, all of us together, and we kept sending like all of us as a community, as early years community, to the Ministry of Education. And what was really impressive that they listened to us immediately, and they announced like a week later, maximum like 5 days, I think, they announced that we will start reopening the nurseries. We have to give you the proper training to open the nurseries and to do the reopening plans. So I think without us standing with each other as a community, that it will happen sooner or later, but it might be delayed somehow. So it was really good that we are all standing out together as a community in Dubai, in the UAE.
That made a big difference, didn't it? And I think that's important for the sector to get that recognition that early years is important. It is the foundation of all the other education. So to see everybody working together in an area that traditionally was more fragmented, just people hadn't had the chance to come together, maybe, was really, really good. Do you feel that parents, I mean, I certainly beginning that I felt in the UK that parents were more appreciative of the fundamental nature of essence of early years. Do you think that's happening in the UAE now as well?
Yes, it was, to be honest, so that was one of the advantages of the lockdown and COVID and everything, that the parents, it was a great opportunity for them to raise awareness about the importance of early years and educators. They appreciate now, when we reopen, they're appreciating really the work of the educators in the classrooms. And they start understanding that it's not early years setting, it's not a daycare. No, we are working, we are just, we're working, or we set the foundation of lifelong learning for each child individually. So we do really appreciate COVID and the lockdown somehow, because the parents actually, they now appreciate and they understand the importance of early years settings.
That's really, really good. Laura, is that when you said you had 3 months hands-on, which was interesting for you, I'm sure, but you also, you get to see lots and lots of different nurseries, you get to talk to lots of different people, and you talk to people outside of nurseries as well. I know you're doing a lot with early years in media, and you've got your fantastic JoJo and Gran series going, and that recognition now. Is that the feeling you're getting from people outside of the nurseries as well, that they understand early years is so important now?
1,000,000%, definitely. And to echo everything that May's saying as well, I think that parents, I think they always, respected the early years sector. They respected, albeit whether or not their child was in a childminder, nursery, preschool, school. But I feel the last year that they've really had that deep level of understanding about what we actually do. And I know that from when I was working in that nursery covering for a friend who was on maternity leave, I went in and meeting the parents, and it was wonderful to see the parents in the morning, having a chat with them about their day, the challenges as well. We have to appreciate that parents also are facing challenges in their jobs. There's redundancy, they're on furlough, there's that level of insecurity. So as well as having conversations with the staffing team about their anxieties and fears, we have to do the same with parents. And I'm sure May would agree with this as well. And I think that's our role as educators, that we do support parents with so many different issues that they face in terms of signposting them. And I know, not just in the UK, when I connect with educators around the world, this is a global issue in terms of early years and parenting. And there's many times when I've seen so many nurseries, I think as Courtney said earlier, that the owners and the heads and the managers, they've developed really good incentives and concepts to support the home learning, and parents who sit on social media praising schools and early years settings for what they've done. And I think now that we've got this, I think let's hope that we can hold on to this and develop this this way of working, in terms of parents and educators as a positive thing moving forward.
I hope so. I think like both of you just said, parents have always been very appreciative of their nurseries. They've had close relationships with them. Nurseries support families as well as just the children. But for me now, it seems a wider understanding. In the media, there's been a big push on the fact that, especially in the UK, and you don't always hear internationally the response, but that women have taken the brunt of the childcare during this pandemic. And when we lose early years places, that it's women that then can't go back to work or can't work. And so there's been stories about women on maternity leave who haven't been able to then get places for their children when they come off maternity leave. So they haven't been able to do that. So I hope that has been much better. The response of everybody is to understand early years is so good. And Courtney, for you as well, because you get to see what's going on from the other side, people still are investing in early years. People still, do you think we will come back? Because you said some early year settings will close and the financial problems are there. But I'm also seeing nursery chains that are increasing. Do you think that the nursery will come back? How quickly will the sector come back, do you think? Sorry, that's a really difficult question. No,
not at all, because I think it's a clear answer. It will come back incredibly quickly. I mean, already, I think we've spoken about the whole profile of the sector has been raised. Those that worked in early years previously, we all know how the role that we play and how important our provision is across the country. But because of lockdown, parents, the profile of early years amongst parents and the importance of early years has massively increased. Now, when we went into the lockdown here exactly almost 12 months ago, March last year, we had 183 transactions, nursery business sales, that all went on hold because at that point in time, no one quite knew what was happening and buyers had to stop their acquisitions to understand how they were going to address COVID in their own businesses. But within a matter of 8 weeks or so, really, Easter time, I think the buyers returned to those transactions because they could see that they wanted to still move forward and expand their business, grow their business. And I think over the summer months, we actually recorded 140% increase in people registering their interest with us, saying they wanted to expand their nursery businesses and buy new nursery businesses. So we completed almost 90 transactions last year, which is pretty phenomenal given the backdrop of COVID. And already, as we approach the end of Q1 2021, there have been multiple transactions, single assets and groups transacted this year already. I think some really interesting points have arisen from May and Laura's comments that, we can see in the UAE, nurseries have been closed for, I think, potentially the longest period of time in any country around the world. Different governments have approached COVID in different ways. Different governments have introduced different fiscal policies and different financial policies to support businesses and early years providers. And those policies will shape those economies going forward. So in the first 2 weeks of the lockdown in the US in March, the unemployment rates increased from 4.4% to 14.7% in just 2 weeks. And that's what in the US. Now, we can see that in other countries, unemployment rates are increasing as well. And clearly this has a significant bearing on the demand for childcare for practitioners and providers. But you make a good point in terms of the role of women in this pandemic and challenges around them working from home as well. I think we see that different countries have reacted in different ways. So in Sweden, nurseries essentially remained open throughout the whole of last year. They only closed for the first time in late December. And in Australia, nurseries remained open throughout, but parents at the start of the pandemic were nervous. They removed their children from nursery, not because the nursery was closed, because they were worried about the virus. So the Australian government introduced incentives for parents to send their children to nurseries, which worked incredibly well. So I think different countries under different leadership have reacted in different ways, but that hasn't stemmed the global demand from operators to acquire not just nurseries in their own location, but nurseries in other territories, because they're divesting some of their risks into different territories and different locations and learning about practice in those areas. So from our perspective, demand from buyers remains strong. You know, there are challenges, but it will come down to the individual performance of that nursery. And so much comes down to the workforce and leadership of that nursery and how they've been looked after, how resilient their staff are. If you have happy staff, contented staff, happy children and parents, and that in itself is what sort of generates the success of that business. So I think we're very positive about the outlook for the next 12 months.
That's brilliant to hear. Just before we talk about well-being of staff, because I think that is absolutely essential as well. And if you don't have happy staff, you're not going to have happy children. I'd like to just talk about the children themselves as well, and how our focus has also changed on not just providing education early years, but what that education looks like and actually what is fundamentally important as well in it. So for me, one of the big things in the UAE or in Dubai in particular was that they changed the school age again. So about 4 or 5 years ago, the school age of children going into school was, the cutoff date was December the 31st. So we had children of 2 years and 8 months going into FS1. And personally, I was very against that, because I was that's not good for young children. That's too soon for formal schooling. In Dubai, we're very lucky. We've got great schools, but often they're very, very big. So the children are going from the smaller, possibly more nurturing view of the nursery to a much bigger. Parents are feeling pressure to do that. So to bring that back in line with the UK, so the cutoff date is August 31st, to me is a good sign that the UAE and other countries understand what is important at early years, and it is about the communication, the language, the personal, social, emotional, those physical, those prime areas of learning. If you're talking about the EYFS, is so important to get those fundamentals in place. So do you think, Laura, that people now are understanding it's not just nursery education is good? May touched on it a bit, and we'll come to her again. She said it's not just about care, but do you think it is people are understanding not just nursery education is necessary, but what kind of nursery education is necessary?
Yeah, I agree. That's a really good point, Sarah, that you're raising. And I think it's one that we need to be having a global conversation on. I spoke last week at a pre-recorded interview that's going out. Can you believe it? We're in March, but it's not going out to July. And one of the things I said is we need to have a global conversation on childhood and what that looks like and what it feels like. And I feel the most important thing, top of the tree for every single child in their early years should be their personal, social and emotional development. And especially now within this last pandemic where, you know, there's been bereavements, there's been so many different changes. We need to come back and have a conversation. What is childhood for? And I think once we get that foundation, that clarity to support children within their early years, because we know what the research informs us and tells us about brain development, about what happens in those first 7 years. And it really, really is important. And when we see, not just in the UK, but with other countries that I work with, this push for academia, this push for children they must write, they must do this, they must do that. And we just, we scream, any of us who are passionate about early years, that no, children have to go through milestones. And I always say this thing and people laugh, but the seriousness of this is that there's a reason why babies, when they're born, they don't come out walking. We all watch the David Attenborough programs, and we watch a new animal was being born, and the mother just giving that, the love, the smell, and then within minutes, the horse is on their feet, standing up. We don't, but human babies don't do that because they have to go through milestones. Between 9 months and 18 months, a baby first starts walking. And so this push, and when early years settings say to them on the global level, but our parents want us to do this with the children. And I say, well, actually, you need to be sharing with your parents in a sensitive way. This is what happens from a child development point of view.
Yeah.
That's why I said, I think earlier, that every single setting must have clarity around their values and their whys, because we have this small window of opportunity to get it right for children in terms of their social and emotional development.
Do you think parents, there's a lot of talk in the UK, and again, May, I'll come to you in a sec, because I'm not quite sure if it's the same in the UAE, but I know there's always pressures from parents for their children to be performing and attaining. How do you feel, Laura, at the moment with a lot of the news about talking about children catching up? We've got to catch children up. We've got to have, whatever age it is. How do you feel about that? Do you think parents will feel that children have got to catch up in the early years, or do you think that the message is strong enough that PSE is important, and what's right for them now is what's right for them now?
I was interviewed by the BBC News in January about this same subject, and I said, well, actually, what are they catching up on? Every single child globally hasn't been at school, or, it's been reduced, it's been online learning. And I think we need to literally not have that conversation around catching up. We need to say every single child, which every educator does, that starting point, the unique child, what is right for that child. And I think, and we know that children pick up so many things straight away. You could have a 3-year-old that speaks fluent English, and then, their family emigrates to China or to another country, and then within a few months, they're able to speak that language. So that just goes, that tells us that actually children do pick up things quite quickly. So I think the emphasis shouldn't be on children catching up with academia. I think we need to press the pause button and to think we need to start giving children the opportunity to reconnect on that social level.
Definitely.
To ground themselves with their emotional and spiritual and personal and the other things will come. They will learn about algebra. They will learn how to write an essay. But let's just focus on their well-being, welfare and wellness first.
I think that's so important. May, what is the feeling like in the UAE on that? Because we've always said that, we've had you and I have had discussions over many years about what's important in early years, and it's always about getting the foundations right. But we also know there's been a lot of pressure in early years from parents, before all of this happened. I've got to get them ready to go into school. They're going to be tested by schools and things like that. Do you feel the message is getting through? I don't know if we've just lost May there or not. Okay, is she coming back?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, the joys of technology, May. I don't know if you heard all of that, but do you feel that parents are resisting or understanding more now? I'm not sure if we've got her there. Okay, we'll come back to her in a moment and come back to that question. So my other burning issue this morning, and we've touched on it a few times, is about staff. May, are you there now? Can you hear us? I think she's frozen. Okay, so we've talked about staff well-being. We're going to come back to you in a moment about that, so don't worry. We talk about staff well-being, and we've all talked about it this morning. Courtney, what are your feelings about, because again, you're very international in your views and what you see. How are staff doing at the moment? How are staff doing, and how are nurseries supporting their staff's well-being at the moment?
I think there's been a very conscious awareness of nursery owners and nursery managers that their staff have found the past 12 months quite challenging. particularly in the UK, staff were providing that frontline service without all of the guidance that subsequently followed. So I think I've seen some fantastic examples of practitioners, lead practitioners, managers known as supporting their staff. I think there have been some developments that actually have been quite beneficial. So where you have small to medium nursery groups, previously they'd be charging around from meeting to meeting, to be able to have quick catch-ups and formal meetings via MS Teams or Zoom, and to have staff social downtime periods via that sort of virtual media as well, so staff can connect with each other, I think is really important. We've seen some sort of great initiatives in terms of just trying to make sure that staff are feeling supported and they're feeling engaged and their well-being, they're being encouraged to look after themselves more so. And so I think there's been a real focus on that throughout the pandemic. Different people have really reacted in different ways, and not everyone, everyone adapts to situations quite differently. So it's not one size fits all. I think a lot of people have been spending more time making sure that their staff are okay, they feel comfortable. And it has, the whole topic of well-being has really risen to the fore in the past 12 months, and that has to continue without doubt going forward.
How do you think that will affect recruitment then? Because I was talking to Fiona last week, and unfortunately she hasn't been able to join us this morning, but I'm going to catch up with her later. And she was talking, so she's based in China, and she was saying that because China's got closed borders, they would normally recruit from Australia, from the UK, from the UAE as well, and that's not going to happen. How do you think international recruitment, again, we'll ask May about this, and there's been a lot of stresses on retention in the UAE as people have left the UAE. How do you think actually recruitment going forward? My feeling is there's been less training going on this year, so there's not been a fresh supply of newly trained, which we know is so important as well to keep the industry going, profession going. So what are your feelings about recruitment, Courtney?
I think recruitment is one of the overarching issues that the sector globally has had for a very long time. The nursery sector, early years, historically, it has been seen as, women's work as a starting point, and lowly paid, and to date, lowly recognised and lowly rewarded. But I think the profile of the sector has raised during the pandemic. I certainly agree that practitioners and providers have not been able to deliver the same sort of training that they would like to, because they've been so awash with operational challenges. That has been a significant problem. We've seen recruitment issues arising in the UK because, as Laura said earlier, operators are having to staff different bubbles of children, and to staff the bubbles and not have crossover, they need additional staff. I think for nurseries in London in particular, that problem has been further compounded by Brexit as well. Clearly, Fiona being in China, they have significant recruitment challenges in China, because when the pandemic hit, they were going into spring break, and a lot of the international staff, they took that 3-week holiday window to go and travel in Vietnam, Thailand, or go home to the UK or US, and then couldn't get back into the country. So I think there are lots and lots of challenges. And I think that's something which there's going to be no short-term easy fix. Recruitment has always been a problem, and I think until the profile of the sector is further enhanced, and until we can remunerate our practitioners for the work that they do, when we recognise their contribution and the value of that work, I think it's a significant challenge.
I think you're right. I think, unfortunately, early years has always been underfunded, under-recognised, and has been, as a career path, has not been given the importance, has it? So therefore, the pay and the conditions haven't always been brilliant. May, I think we're okay with you now again, so we're going to come back to you if that's okay. So we'll go back to about children in just a moment, but we'll talk about carry-on staffing as well, because the UAE, like many overseas countries, where you may recruit locally, you may recruit people whose partners have brought them to the country to work. How has recruitment been for you and retention been for you and the sector in the UAE over the last few months?
So as Courtney said, we've lost during the pandemic. We've lost few educators because they traveled back to their countries and they were not able to come back, or their husband, they lost their jobs and they had to travel back to their countries with their families. So it has been challenging to find the right candidate and the good candidate for early years now. However, we were really working on the retention of our current educators to keep them with us. So the ones who didn't travel outside of the UAE, they were all back to the nursery when we reopened. But still, it is challenging, of course, to find the right candidate for early years.
I think you particularly found it challenging because you didn't know how long you were going to be closed for, did you? So I know that people carried on paying staff in the first, well, from like March to June, July, and then over summer, I guess you lost more people as well. Is there that? Sorry, go on.
We didn't imagine we didn't predict how long we will be closed. So at the beginning we thought it would be like, okay, after the spring break we will come back. Then later on we said, okay, maybe in the summer we will come back. Then we said in September. So we were giving ourselves hopes to that, yes, we're open and we're reopening, but we don't know when. And that's what made us lost a few of our members, or in other nurseries as well, they lost their team members because of that.
And how are they supporting the well-being of staff now? How, what is the view? I mean, Courtney talked about, and Laura did, about the financial constraints on everybody. And if money is tight, is training one of the first things that go? Is staff well-being? They know it's important, but is there resources to maintain it as well, or to promote it? How it.
Look, so the nurses in the UAE, we're trying as much as we can to work on the well-being of the teachers, because if we don't work on the well-being of the teacher, it will really impact the children, affect the children in the classroom. Yes, of course, like you said, the finance is not, we don't get any support financially, actually, so it's only the nurseries, but we are trying our best to even if small gestures to work on the well-being and positivity and appreciation to the teachers. And I think it's working well so far, but it will have to take from us a lot more of effort, and it will be like on the long run, not only once or twice. Now we have to keep working on the well-being all the time of the teachers and all the educators in the setting.
Laura, thank you, May. Laura, that's like the well-being of staff. That's like you've mentioned today, and I know we've had many conversations about the well-being of staff. Have you seen anything particular that's working well that you think that'll be great for other settings to take up? Some things that aren't always expensive in financial terms, maybe, or sorry, that's putting a lot of emphasis on trying to find the best solution with the least resources, which early years has always been really good at doing.
I know, I've seen so many good ideas in the sector in the UK and globally, and I think, as May said, that needs to be the priority, because if your staff aren't there, I always have a saying, the educators need to be turned on and tuned in, so we need to be starting with the educators. So things like having a well-being basket within the staff room area, checking in on staff, finding out what's actually going on for them. And I think the heads having that level of professional curiosity, because it's had so much of an impact. There's, as you so rightly said, there's educators and teachers haven't been able to see their families. And I think having that recognition, so it could be an extra day off shopping, it could be allowing staff to leave early, it could be providing what I would call, providing the chocolates. We had International Women's Day, and I did a coaching session with a head on Monday, and she said she brought in a rose for every single member of her staff team. They had chocolates, having things like communal lunch. In the UK, the restaurants are still shut. So they're bringing in, they're having meals as a team, staying extra, having Saturday things. And I think all of those you know, those nice little things that say to staff, we appreciate you. And also there are some nurseries that I know have given an additional bonus, even if it's something small, treated to a spa day, so when the spa's opened, and just those touches. So what I'm seeing is, you know, the educators and teachers really appreciating the owners saying to them, we appreciate you, we know you are doing a good job in very, very difficult circumstances. And equally too, there are some educators and teachers that haven't been able to go into a setting because they've had to be, you know, they've had to isolate for a year. And those educators have told me they've still got some really good support from their owners within that. So I think the message that I would do is, and ask your educators, your teams, what do they want? What's gonna help you with your well-being? And I think sometimes it's not a cost issue, it's not a financial issue, it's about being creative with what with the resources that we have in our setting and in our local community.
Which early years has always been really, really good about that, hasn't it? About making the best of the small resources. One thing that's been very interesting as well for me is about this blend of personal and professional and getting the balance right as well. And we know that working in early years is incredibly tiring, is, you know, it's challenging, it's often long days, it's very, very rewarding, it's a great job, but it's also the hardest job, isn't it? So in the UK, there's a lot of talk about, in other professions, about, you know, blended learning, working from home for some of the week, working, but that can't happen in early years, or can it, Courtney? What do you think? Do you think, you know, from this, we've said that there's going to be a lot of positive things that come from this. Do you think we'll look at different ways of working? Do you think, you know, Laura just said about giving people time off to go, a day off to go shopping, or, you know, leave early. Is that possible though in our profession?
I think what's been evident around the world during the pandemic is that business leaders have had to adapt their business incredibly quickly at little or no notice. So from our perspective as professional advisors, if we had been asked to formulate a plan to relocate our 30 international offices to home working, it would have taken 5 years to have written the plan, and it may have not been implemented. But under government direction, work from home, we were preparing for it. We had our plan within 2 weeks, and within 2 weeks, all of our colleagues were working from home. So businesses have adapted really, really quickly. And that's been evident across the nursery sector as well, in terms of the way that they operate. I think behaviours amongst the wider workforces that have been able to work from home have changed. So, you know, professional advisors, lawyers, accountants, are we all going to return to the office 5 days a week when we're able to? I suspect not. I think there'll be a balance of working from home and working from the office. Now, those parents that have childcare, their childcare requirements might change slightly. So if a parent's working from home 3 days a week, they may not need to be going for the early morning drop-off at 7:30 in the morning, or the late collection pickup at 7 in the evening. And so providers will have to adapt their offering to meet the changing needs of the parents, but that should then award them to adapt that to their workforce. So actually that might mean that the workforce do indeed benefit from more flexible working, which is matching the needs of the parents, but it's not sort of cast in stone as the way it would be 5 days a week from 8 till 7 or 8 till 6 or 6:30. And I think those operators that are able to adapt quickly and, you know, manage their staff rotas very effectively, that will award practitioners time off and time out. And we've seen that adapting steadily over recent decades, but this will now potentially be a catalyst for that to move forward. But it takes organisation, it takes planning, and we all know staffing ratios and staffing is the biggest challenge for any business. But hopefully, settle down, that will be able to be on the table for a review every single week, so that there's greater flexibility for practitioners to meet with parents' needs.
I think that would be a very positive way forward if that is something that comes out of it. And as you said, the speed of change has been massive, hasn't it, compared to what it might have been? So that's really good. May, can I just come back to you, please, but on two of those things? So one about, do you think that different working practices will be possible in Dubai and the UAE on those premises that Courtney was talking about? And do you think the question that you unfortunately were able to answer because of technical issues a little bit earlier on, do you think parents are understanding what is important for their children now? Because those two things almost go hand in hand, don't they? That, you know, why children are in nursery, it's not just about care, as you spoke about before. So do you think we'll see a change in the nursery sector the way moving forward?
I believe all the time that we have to work with the parents in partnership to not to educate them, but to let them know what they should be expecting from the children. The thing that what's happening here in the UAE, that with the assessment of the school, so that's why the parents, they're expecting the children to hold the pens or to write their names, and that's why we need to work really closely with them to tell them that these are not the important things that we need to work on. We need to work on like Clora said, on the social, emotional, personal the skills, on the communication and language. We want to raise confident and independent children to be our leaders later on. So sooner or later, academic will come, but we really need to work on the children individually, on their interest base, not on the topic base that this is the topic of the week or of the month, and this is what we have to follow. So I think, it has been always working with the parents is the first thing, to let them understand why are we working on those development and not working on knowing the phonics, for example, from the first day of the nursery, or pre-writing skills from the first day, because we need to do other steps before we reach that point. So that's regarding actually the parents and how to work on. The other question, I'm so sorry, I forgot about the second question.
That's okay, that's okay. So I was just saying about, Courtney was very positive there and thinking that the workforce and the way that we treat our workforce may change, because Laura was saying this well-being and resilience was so important, and to treat them well. Do you think that we've traditionally had very long days in the UAE, people have worked very hard, do you think it will change like that as well to support the staff well-being? Do you think this is a time for change for that too?
It starts changing already, because if, for example, if we were having 70% of our children staying long days or coming on 5 days a week, now we have 30% only staying till 5 p.m. Or coming 5 days a week. And the majority of the children, they're coming 3 days or 2 days a week with less hours. So I think it started already, it started impacting on us, on how many days the children are coming, for example, or how long the children are staying. So that can help us later on, of course, as Courtney said, to adjust the timetable of the educators, the teachers, the junior educators, and so on.
So that will be very positive. Ladies, I've had a lovely time talking to you, and I've taken up lots of your time, so thank you very much. But just before we finish, I'd like to ask each of you to kind of sum up how you are feeling about the sector at the moment. I certainly have seen a challenging year, but I'm also very positive things going forward. And those positive things are promoted by the passion that we've always had in early years, the passionate individuals to do what is right for children and to stand up and be counted and use their voices as advocacy for the children's needs. So I'm pretty positive moving forward, and it's a good time for change. So if I can ask each of you, Laura, could you start by summing up how you're feeling about things, and then we'll go to Courtney and then May, please.
Yeah, I think I'd echo your sentiments there, Sarah. I think we have seen some challenges. We've seen the sector step up with very little resources, which shows that we can be creative. And I think moving forward, we will be seeing a difference within the sector, but I think there'll be so many positives. I think we'll have new ideas coming through, as Courtney was saying about the flexible childcare. I think definitely that, in terms of the workforce, that will have an impact. And I think we'll do what we always do best in the sector, is to be positive, is to be resilient, is to be, and the number one thing that we are, even on a global level, when I have so many conversations on a weekly basis all over the world, that we're solution driven. We're solution driven, we help each other, we're kind and we're passionate. And I think that will remain moving forward. And I see the future still being really positive in the next few years. It's going to be amazing.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Those are very encouraging words. Thank you, Courtney. How are you feeling at the moment about us, the sector, and the way forward?
I'd very much echo Laura's words. I mean, I think as well, from my perspective personally, you know, I'm not an operator, but I work with the sector, and I couldn't be prouder to work with the sector. Everyone involved, practitioners, providers, they have operated amongst and dealt with the most challenging of circumstances. And, you know, they've faced those issues on a daily basis, and they remain positive, and they've done the best for the young children in their care and supported the families that they work with. So I think that's just a phenomenal accolade to their dedication, determination and passion. I think looking forward, as Laura said, there's so much opportunity for review. There's opportunity for collaboration. There's opportunity for innovation. We've seen some great innovation in the past 12 months from, you know, the team Zoom meetings, saving on time and energy, from parents being able to go on virtual video tours of the nursery they'd like to send their child to because they've been unable to physically visit the nursery. I mean, my team and we inspect about 1,000 nurseries a year normally. I haven't set foot in a nursery for 12 months. I can see from the videos what's going on, but I actually want to get back in the nursery. I want to see the
Definitely.
walking around a vacant building is so different to walking around and watching the practitioners engage with children and, you know, saying, oh, it's just, I miss that, and I'm looking forward to getting back to that. And I'm so looking forward to making that together for all these early years conferences, you know, and the guest events that we miss, where so much great experience is shared via networking, communication, talking to others. Zoom has been fantastic. MS Teams has been fantastic. My goodness, I really wanted to get back to seeing people face to face and just hearing what they've been going through. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I think that the future is positive. As Laura said, we're a resilient sector. We work together, and we all have the common goal of achieving the best outcomes for the children in our care. So I'm excited about the year ahead, and I think there'll be lots of opportunity and new prospects.
I agree with you totally. I can't wait to meet people face to face and see you again face to face, and to be in Dubai with you, May. So how are you feeling as we finish today?
It was a challenging year, to be honest, but it was a really good opportunity for us to improve ourselves and learn more and to be more creative, as Laura said, to work together as the early years sector, all of us to work together, to appreciate more the educators and the practitioners, and to know how to work more on their well-beings. So I think, yeah, it was challenging, but it was really good, a step forward for all of us as early years.
Good. Thank you so much. I think you're all right. I think this has made us stronger and even better, and moving forward, it's exciting times. Thank you, Courtney and Laura and May. Thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed chatting to you, and I look forward to chatting to you all in person very, very soon. Thank you. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you. That was very inspiring discussion, and it's amazing to hear encouraging conclusions. We all look forward to welcoming you to Guest Dubai in November as well in person. So we look forward to that. Thank you so much, ladies, for sharing your valuable insight and expertise. If anyone from the audience has any questions pertaining to the session, you can connect with the speakers through the networking system on the virtual event platform. We'd also love to hear from you, so feel free to share any thoughts or comments by sending us an email to marketing@guesteducation.com. We'll be on social media as well during the summit, so if you want to chat to us there, follow us on Twitter @guesteducation and use the hashtags #guestglobal and #guesteducation. We hope that you enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you, and bye-bye for now.
Thank you. Goodbye from all of us. Bye. Bye.